When Disney bet everything on an adult-themed theme park called California Adventure, they forgot the one thing that actually made them special, giving families what they actually want. Today, I'll be discussing my experience as a former employee of Disneyland working at California Adventure, and I'm going to explain what went wrong and what this can teach you about branding your business. I'm Mark DeGrasse, founder of AI Branding Academy, and I actually worked as an outdoor vendor at Disneyland during the California Adventure launch. So this was around 2001, 2002, and I actually worked within the park in a few different locations. You could pick up shifts whenever you want them, so I ended up working at like the French Bakery and the McDonald's, and as an outdoor vendor selling ice cream and balloons and glowy things. That was my job. And so I was actually there and saw it on multiple occasions, the park be completely empty, where you could walk from the front to the back of the park and literally see no visitors for that entire walk. This is at like 11 or 12 in the morning. And I just thought it was so odd, and it was really boring because there's nothing to do. And if you picture that today, it just sounds astounding because there's no way you could even find one day like that currently. And the reason's pretty simple. When California Adventure launched, they launched it as an adult themed park. And what I'm going to do today is give you 6 different lessons that you could learn from this massive failure. Because a lot of us think like, oh, well, if you just have enough funds, you could push the marketing through, you could figure out the brand, you could do all these elements because of money. And what this proved was that is not true. Even for the biggest brand in the world, still not true. You can't just tell people to like something. And if you miss the mark, you're done. It just won't work, and you're going to have to make a massive pivot, which they did eventually, and it was eventually successful. But the initial failure actually says a lot about what they're doing. Now, I'm going to quote a few statistics just to show you what a failure it was, because you could say, oh, it was a failure, but they're making millions. No, it was just a massive failure. So the average weekday attendance was 5,000 to 9,000 visitors. Compare that with today, they're at 33,000 daily. So very, very much less significant. The entire year was about 5 million people, which sounds like, oh, that'd be pretty good. No, it wasn't. And then worse was the visitor satisfaction rate, which was 20%. There weren't enough attractions. The food was good, but there's nothing for kids to do. And honestly, it was primarily families that were coming to the park, and they want the attractions and they want to see their Disney movies. They don't care about just California. We're in California. You could go to the places that the park is supposed to be kind of helping you go to. The entire concept was flawed. And again, it just shows that no matter how much money you have, if you miss the mark, you're still going to lose. So let's go ahead and go through the 6 lessons I think you can learn from the California Adventure fail. So number one is maintaining consistency. And we talk about that a ton at the Academy. And actually, the advantage of using AI for branding is that you can maintain that consistency. But with California Adventures, they broke the consistency. They didn't feature stuff for kids. They didn't feature cartoons or their movies. Like they had rides like Paparazzi Adventure, or I forgot, Paparazzi Madness. It was where you sat in this car. And actually, the ride is still there. But originally, they changed it to something else, of course, because around the same time, Princess Diana died in the paparazzi accident, and they had this paparazzi ride where you're being chased around by photographers. A huge disaster there. But overall, they just lack consistency with their typical brand, the fantasy, the storytelling, like all of those elements. They just threw out the window and said, "Hey, here's some tourist stuff you can do." So number one is you have to maintain brand consistency, even if you are launching a new aspect of the brand. Still has to be consistent with the core brand if you're keeping it under the same name. Number two is understanding your audience. And this was the biggest failure, I think, was that, they just ignored everything, every reason why people come to Disneyland, which is to reconnect with their youth, spend times in a fantastical land with their children, and really just be a family. They basically said like, hey, adults, you could send your kid to Disneyland, come over to, California Adventure and drink wine and hang out with your friends. So it was a core misunderstanding of why people go to Disneyland. And even the adults that go go by themselves and maybe they don't have families or kids, they just enjoy that nostalgia that they get, the fantasy that you get, and you get to live in this world for a little bit. California Adventure basically said like, hey, even though you're in California, here's some more California for you. And it was, just a core misunderstanding of who they were serving. Number three is overextension. Now, again, this is the biggest brand in the world. They should be able to launch lots of stuff, but even with their movies, you could see that even if you are a top brand, you still come out with crummy product. And California Adventure was just a crummy product. And it was an overextension of what they thought they can do and what they can convince people that they can do using their brand as kind of this stable platform. Like people will buy it because it's us. And they overextended. They spent way too much money and time and effort on it. And, it hurt the company overall and almost tanked it, to be frank. So, they had to pivot and redo. And again, even with all the money in the world, because I think for small businesses, we always think like, oh, if I had more money, I'd be able to go out and do these things I really want to do. It's no, that's not what you should do. You could experiment with things. And honestly, if they just tried a few experiments with California Adventure concepts within Disneyland, they may have found that, oh, this isn't resonating. This ride that has nothing to do with our movies and nothing to do with our characters isn't resonating. We probably can't make a whole park out of that. But, again, they didn't, and they overextended, and it was really dangerous. Number four, and this kind of goes back to understanding your customers, but respecting emotional connections. Again, they tried, it was very sterile. Like the park itself just felt sterile. It felt like, oh, it's neat, and there's some scenes here, and there's some neat rides, and it's talking about California, but there was no emotional connection with the characters and the storytelling. And that's really Disneyland's strong suit. And they just ignored all that and said, oh, we're just going to give some neat things. And so they said emotional connection doesn't matter. Neat things and cool visuals matter more, and it didn't work. So if you're a small business thinking that you could just put out neat things and not connect emotionally, you're probably not going to be as successful as you would if you just added that story in there, added the emotional connection, and really show that you care about your customer in the process. Number five is to be authentic. This is something that, everybody, it's difficult to do a lot of the times, but you have to try. And being authentic means being authentic to your story, your background, everything that got you to the place where you're going, instead of just throwing it out the window. Never throw it out the window. Still incorporate, the authenticity of your experience into all of your products and all of your marketing, all of your branding. Otherwise, people could see through that, or they might not even see it. And I think that's what happened with California Adventure, where it was like, oh, I'm going to Disneyland. Oh, I'm so excited about Space Mountain because I love space and I love Star Wars and all that kind of stuff. Instead of like, oh, I'm just going to a carnival. People get excited about carnivals, but it's not like I have to go there and I have to do that thing. There's no reason. I could get that anywhere. I could go on rides anywhere. Why should I come to this one place? And it's because that authenticity that you provide. And even something I remember going to like the Orange County Fair growing up, and there was still an emotional connection there because they incorporated the community into it. I remember going to a science competition in grade school, and there was the first time you heard of things like a fried Snicker bar and carnival type things, but that's still a brand. And so that's authentic to what they were, a fairground, versus Disneyland, where they're like, we're just going to ignore all the stuff that made us successful, and we're just going to do a new thing and see how it goes. It wasn't successful. So be authentic, and you're going to hear that again all the time when you're talking about branding. And finally, invest in quality from the start. So, Disneyland, they did put some effort into these rides, but some of them, like the Paparazzi Adventure, felt kind of like, that's kind of neat. Even California Screaming, I don't know what they call the big roller coaster, the white one in the back with the flip. I don't know what they call it now, but it was originally called California Adventure. And it's like, that's fine. Or California Soaring, they had this kind of IMAX experience where you were soaring over California. It was nice, but you could tell that it almost felt lazy in the storytelling. And then some of the rides just felt cheap. They just were not that fun, not that innovative. And so they were really, again, it felt like a test, and it was an unsuccessful test. So even if you are, let's say that you go all in on a concept, you better bring it. You better bring the quality, you better bring the effort, because if you're expecting to impress somebody with something new, it better be impressive. It can't be, oh, that's new. New isn't good enough. New has to be either better or good in a different way from what you currently serve. So keep that in mind. If you are going to go out there, you are going to make a big risk, then put everything you got into it. Make it so undeniably impressive that people are going to, buy it or, sign up, whatever it is. But that's it. So, I hope you learned some lessons from California Adventure's failure. I think that was a neat experience for me to see firsthand as an employee, and just see that you can't be, there's no such thing as too big to fail, especially when it comes to branding. You can fail with all the money and all the resources available to you if you ignore those 6 lessons which we talked about today.